Yeah, that's what I told the police. And I said I stopped at a payphone.
Would conclude they were both written by the same person.
Hey, it's Dr. Phil here. If you're smart, you will subscribe to the Behavior Panel.
I said, let's do the one from the Jinx because I've seen clips and it looks good.
Yeah. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Here we go. I'm Scott Rouse. I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train law enforcement and the military in interrogation and body language. I've written one book, and I created the #1 online body language course, Body Language Tactics, with Greg. Mark?
I'm Mark Bowden. I'm an expert in human behavior and body language. I help people all over the world to stand out, win trust, and gain credibility every time they communicate, including some of the leaders of the G7. Chase.
Hey, I'm Chase Hughes, did 20 years in the U.S. military. I published the #1 best-selling book in behavior profiling, persuasion, and influence. I train intelligence agencies and the general public in those things. You can learn more at chasehughes.com. Greg?
Greg Hartley. I'm a former interrogator, interrogation instructor, resistance to interrogation instructor. I've written 10 books on body language and behavior. Put together the #1 body language course online, bodylanguagetactics.com. And I spend most of my time on Wall Street or corporate America.
All right. Today we're going to talk about a guy named Robert Durst. And he's accused of killing 3 people. The first one was his wife, Kathleen McCormack Durst. And that was she disappeared in 1982 in New York. And then Susan Berman, his longtime friend, and she was killed in Los Angeles in 2000. And his neighbor, Morris Black, who was killed in Texas in 2001. Greg, you found the videos. Why don't you tell us about them?
Yeah, these are from an HBO series called The Jinx. And actually, it came to me from one of our viewers who sent me a link and said, hey, look at these videos. And I've only watched portions of that, but thanks to our viewer. And as you said, he's been tried for 1 murder. He's on trial for another. And the 3rd death has been now reopened to be investigated as a murder.
Yeah, and this is from a documentary that was on HBO. Yep. And if you haven't seen it yet, be sure you watch it. It is fantastic. The guys who put it together, it's my favorite documentary. So I think you ought to watch it, and I suggest you do because it is unbelievable. It's awesome. Now, if you like what we're doing, please subscribe and hit the little bell, and it lets you know when we have a new episode come out.
Yes, so hit that bell. And listen, my guess is you probably know somebody as well who'd really love the show, really benefit, like you, from what we do. So tell them about it. Drop them an email, get them on social media, put it out on social media. Come and join us here as a panelist, just like you're doing. And make sure you subscribe. Tell all your friends.
All right. So, ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
You told Detective Struck that the Sunday night that you last saw Kathy, you had dropped her off the station, and then you went to the mayor's for a drink, the neighbors.
Yeah, that's what I told the police. I was hoping that would just make everything go away. I didn't go to the mayor's. I just took her to the train station, went home, and went to sleep.
Yep. All right. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, watch him. We always talk about eyelids and we talk about blink rate. This is not the blink rate of stress. There's no stress in this guy at this point. And what he's talking about, he maybe should be stressed. However, that's the processing thing. That's the data intake. Just a couple of 3 flutters and then back out. It's not constant. And so you can tell if he were in blink rate that's constantly moving that way, a little bit different. He's doing a little bit of recall mixed with, are you buying this as he's telling the story? And we got to be careful because we're going to see him move his eyes around a lot. When we talk about eye movement, everybody's going to say his eyes go here when he's asked a question. Yeah, it depends on the question he's asking. You'll see in this thing a couple of locations. I'll talk about accessing versus rifling through memory or just trying to make something up as he goes. This interviewer is telegraphing in this one, this is bad. You see his face like, hey, you told the police this? And he still doesn't get it. There's a little bit of slight smile of amusement. Look at that amusement in his face as he's telling this story. And then his eyes kind of light up and his hands are moving. His little shoulder rises. His hands are moving down below. I don't think it's shoulder rise from, hey. I think it's him moving his hands and you see his shoulders moving. That's all I got. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, so during questioning, there is an exposure of his jugular. And I think this is image management. That's a learned behavior. And there's a need to appear vulnerable and not threatened. And I think that's really what we're seeing at the beginning. There's also a shoulder shrug with both shoulders, which I believe is a covert apology. Just, I don't have anything else for you. And this rapid eye blinking is not necessarily in his baseline. And I think this is eye blocking behavior. And there is some borderline contempt or facial wrinkling on the left side of the face. And right at the end, we see a hard swallow. So those would be the red flags for me that would indicate or denote deception in the absence of a whole lot of stress, which we usually talk about. So this is an interesting case that we're not analyzing a whole bunch of stress here. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so pretty calm, pretty relaxed. But then with that, as you said, Chase, there's a display of an over display, I would say, of attack points, kill points on the body. We see that as the chin comes up, exposing these delicate areas, vulnerable areas here. I'm going to put that down as an arrogant gesture. Doesn't quite kind of fit with the simple question being asked and the calm demeanor around it. So that indicates to me something may be up around this. Also, disgust we see in the nose opening up, little bit of wrinkle there, I think, as you were saying there as well, Chase. And then we get contempt or disdain. And I think we get that in a couple of places, maybe even a bit of anger there. The side of the mouth turns up there, and also we get a display of as the lip curls up as well, and almost a display of the incisor there. I mean, there's just a lot going on in there. I'm trying to, keep it down to 1 point or a few points on every one of these videos, because in my view, there is so much happening in this. There's such a lot happening that I think you're going to find it's a real jamboree of signals going on here. So Scott, what do you got for us?
Yeah, this guy is a barrel full of ticks and little OCD things, cues, I guess. And what we're seeing in a lot of this is what I would reference it as tick control. Trying to get a hold of those and try not to do things. He as we go through this, you'll see he's a master of controlling his stress on the outside, where it's eating him alive on the inside. And we'll see there toward the end why that is. So I think what we're seeing here, his eyes are darting around a lot. So that usually denotes and it indicates fear, concern, and anxiety, because he's feeling this thing ramp up to some questions that are going to be uncomfortable for him. We see the left eye wince a little bit. I think that's just for show. I think that's being used as something to help us go, this is nothing, it's no big deal. And we are seeing that in his illustrators as well as we go through. I think a lot of that shoulder movement is actually, I think you're right, Greg, it's coming from his hands, and you too, Chase, because he's talking about, do you see him go up? I don't know. It's a lot of that. So we're seeing his shoulders do that, but we can't see his hands. You can see little bitty bits of them on the sides. That's the only reason I know that. And that's all helping to qualify what he's saying. So I agree with all you guys. Everything in here is like, hey, it's okay. It's not that big a deal. It doesn't affect me. It's nothing. Of course, for the wince and the eyes darting around, that's when it cues you into knowing that he's a little anxious. He's feeling anxiety here. And he's got those little ticks going on at the end, which increase as we go along. In a little while, we're going to see a video on his baseline. We're not going to see many ticks at all. But when he starts getting some pressure on him, that's when we start seeing the ticks. So let's pay attention to that. All right, we good?
Good.
All right.
You told Detective Struck that the Sunday night that you last saw Kathy, you had dropped her off the station and then you went to the mayor's for a drink, the neighbors.
Yeah, that's what I told the police. I was hoping that would just make everything go away. I didn't go to the mayor's. I just took her to the train station, went home, and went to sleep.
And why would that have made everything go away?
Well, then I'm at the mayor's. They wanted to hear, what did you do? So I told them I did that. I just never got through my mind. It was like a negotiation. You tell somebody something, and well, that's it. They don't go back there. They don't look for motive. And why is he telling me this kind of thing? I thought that would get them to, leave me alone, accept the missing person like that.
Guy's got some dark eyes on him.
Oh, yeah.
Dark eyes, like a doll's eyes. All right. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I love to see the big body movements. It's kind of where I started in nonverbal and body language was working with and looking at the what I would call the gross body movement, the bigger body movement. So I think first of all we get a little bit of venting, which is when somebody opens up under here in order to release a little bit of the heat that might be going on, because it first it rises to release air around the armpit area. So I'm going to say that's venting again, could be around most likely around some kind of stress here. Then we get what I call some psychological gesture. So he talks about the mayor. The mayor is high up, and he does an away gesture. Like again, he's trying to push the idea away. High up person, not even worth thinking about this story. It kind of glides and is pushed away. And then I think we almost get one of the "I'm bigger than you thought I was" gestures. He almost puts his hands behind his head to go, look how large I am. Look at these spiky things here. I'm totally relaxed and you wouldn't want to attack me because you'd hit these areas here. I'm totally vulnerable and relaxed at the same time. Doesn't quite do it, but I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd have gone there. Again, it'd be totally incongruous to an interview around, as I understand it, these are interviews around murders or potential murders that he may or may not be involved with. That's pretty incongruous. So maybe he stops himself going there. Now, I got to say, some of this big demonstrative gesture, it seems quite cultural. It seems to me quite kind of New York. I'm not sure whether he is from New York, but it feels, New York, big, demonstrative. We'll see some other gestures that feel cultural to me as well later on. But again, I think there's enough stress in there around this venting and almost going for "I'm bigger than you thought I was" gesture, that there's something up here that is greater than what should be if he had some innocence around this. Let's just say that. Greg, what do you got?
So he's doing a little bit of front of mouth talking. His mouth is, all of his voice is up here now. There's nothing back here. That's lack of confidence. That's according to me, I guess it's Chase, as you would say. He's talking in the front of his mouth, which is not confident. We typically think of booming voices as people who are confident in driving home a point and that kind of thing. The interviewer looks at him like, "Are you thick?" at one point here. I'm sure before it's over, you'll see a lot more of that interview. These guys do a great job of asking questions, and I want to applaud them for it because they do a couple of really close to getting real information things. Then Durst does the eye block and the concentration. You see his brow draw up as well. There's some grandiose gesturing, Mark. I'm not going to hit that one again, except for to say, that you're hitting a typical thing we all understand when there's an emoticon, even back in the DOS days of that. What's a man to do? That whole thing. And there is one. So he's in that, as you said, the grotesque plane. I had it written down here. Mark has something to say about these overdone movements. The interesting one to me is at one point, it almost looks like he's trying to sneak a watch look in. Like, how long am I going to be in here? If you see him turn his wrist and look over at it, I didn't notice if he had a watch on or not. I just noticed his body language. That's when he does this, it's the look, I didn't think ahead. What are you going to do? This is awfully bold talk when you've been accused of murder, the kind of thing he's doing here. And to your point, Scott, his eyes are dark, but there's no pupil dilation here. I don't see any pupil dilation. And we know one group of people whose pupils don't dilate when they're in fight or flight or when they're pushed. I mean, their pupils still dilate to positive things, but not to negative things. You start to look at, he's using his hands, to your point, Mark, exactly like a New Yorker. There's this and that, this and that. Lots of big movement. Then his blink rate comes up right there at the end. When he's saying, "I didn't think of it." There's a couple of other things in here. Motive, real people. People, when you're talking about why there's a negotiation, real people don't have to think of motive, because when I'm telling you something and I'm saying, "Hey, I dropped you off at the train station," well, that's the way people typically talk. But when you're now starting to say, "I didn't expect it to be a negotiation," that's guilty language. That is guilty language. When I'm interrogating a person, they say, "Well, I didn't expect there to be negotiation." And motive, well, that's not the way people talk. That's not the way people, now I'm sounding like you, Scott. That's not the way people typically talk when they're innocent. They just say it's what happened. I was trying to get the police off me is not what they say. He gets the dry mouth. Now, he's later said he was on meth at the time, and maybe that's the case. Maybe not. Don't know. But all of this together is starting now to make me jump in and go, The first one, I thought it was just a little arrogant, and he's overly polished, and his hair is all perfect and all that. And he's very, very concerned about maintaining image. We're going to see that as we go through this. That's what I got. Scott, what do you got?
All right. These illustrators are huge. Again, he's trying to qualify everything, and his illustrators are being used to enhance the qualification of what he's talking about, to make it seem like it's not that big a deal. His voice cadence, as he's speaking cadence, is what I call fake loping. He's told this section of this story a lot, but he's just going through and he's trying to make it sound normal, but it doesn't because he's a little stressed about this. And we know he's stressed because he shows a little bit of fear. We see a little bit of mouth of his teeth flashing just a little bit, just a hint of that, which as Mark always talked about monkeys and fear, and so does Greg. That's one thing you'll see that even monkeys do. If they get afraid, they'll show their teeth. Another thing we see is his nostrils flare just a little bit. This looks to me like we're heading down the fear road. Not that he would fear it, being the type of person, his personality type he is. I don't think he has a lot of fear. But something's firing off in that limbic system that's making his nostrils flare and him breathe in a little bit deep. I think it's fear. We see his tics and his nervousness and anxiety start to increase here as well, especially there at the end when he starts all the blinking and face squishing and those types of things. I think he's still trying to contain those tics because later on when we see him, he's just going to be taken out of control. The shoulder shrugs, again, those are part of his illustrators. We can't see his hands very well, but those shrugs are part of his illustrating, which go back to him trying to qualify what he's saying. I think at this point he's starting to feel the heat here a little bit. Chase, what do you got?
Agree with all you guys, and I think the sneaking the look at the watch, like Greg pointed out, I saw that this morning too, and I'm looking at this, and I think this is a way to distract his eyes so that he's trying to get maybe just a minute or maybe an excuse to look away and say, oh, I'm busy doing this. This is the reason that this gesture took place. Again, there's face crinkling on the left side as he closes his statement with more rapid eye blinking and a hard swallow right here at the end. So keep in mind when we look at his baseline, this swallow behavior might not be there. And that's all I got.
Hey, Chase, want to add, I think when you're talking about him doing that thing, I forgot to add this in. At the end of his thoughts, you're going to see a baseline movement. I'm done with that. And it's not exactly that, but you'll see it consistently moving through here. I'm done with that thought. He's finished and he moves on.
Cool.
And why would that have made everything go away?
Well, then I'm at the mayor's. They wanted to hear, what did you do? So I told them I did that. I just never got through my mind. It was like a negotiation. You tell somebody something and, well, that's it. They don't go back there. They don't look for motive and why is he telling me this kind of thing. I thought that would get them to, leave me alone, accept the missing person like that.
There was some discussion about that you spoke to her at some point.
Yes, that was the last part of my, the police are going to leave you alone now. I said, I called her, and I said I stopped at a payphone on the way home, or I went out for a walk later, and I called her from the payphone. She answered the phone, and that puts her in the city, and they're going to leave me alone now.
Did you end up speaking to her that night?
No.
Okay, Chase, what do you got?
We start off with this excitatory, dismissive, throwaway gesture, get rid of it, followed by a hard swallow, which I think is a pretty big red flag, which would make me want to jump into that statement and start digging. When he says payphone, we see another little left side of the face wrinkle, which I think is a gesture that he has developed to conceal something that we will see in a future video and talk about that in just a minute. There's a hard squint at this ending with this hard swallow. And right when he makes the denial, he says no. There's what a behavior person would call a postural retreat. So this backward leaning movement away from the interviewer. There's lip compression. There's hard eye squinting and eye blocking there, which would all be things that suggest deception. Scott?
All right. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think as illustrators, again, we're seeing these big illustrators using them as qualifiers. Like, this is no big deal. He's sort of almost blowing it off. And I think the swallow as well, that's sort of giving him time to think. I don't think he needs to, but I think that's sort of that little split second amount of time, let him develop that story and let it get him everything structured right for him. His tics are increasing. So that's showing that his anxiety is ramping up a little bit, his concern for what's happening. There's an issue here, as Joe Navarro would say. And the issue is he's probably killed this guy. But so that's we're seeing his stress level start to rise a little bit more here. And I think overall his anxiety is growing at a pretty quick clip here. And I think we're seeing these tics come on. He starts talking about the phone and stuff. When he starts the big ones where you go, wow, look at that. I think when he's lying, I think that's what we're seeing. I think that's an indicator of him lying at this point. So it may not be every time, but so far with the information that we know about what he's talking about, this isn't true. So, and he even says it isn't true. So I think we can almost count on those. We can look at those and say, okay, there are no absolutes. We can say, okay, that might be a lie because he's doing this with that. And we see those. And he's just explained how to make it look like she was alive without him being there. He just gave away his alibi. And when he said, I told him I called her and did all this stuff. I don't understand what he's doing here. I don't understand why he's why he's saying what he did and he knows it's not true. Then he says it wasn't true. I don't know if it's some kind of weird reverse psychology thing or something, but it's very odd. It's unusual to be doing something like that. Greg, what do you got?
I'll tell you what it is. It's dumb. It's just dumb. I mean, all I wrote down here, does he have any friends or an attorney? Because this is just outright dumb. What he goes in the room and says is, that's what I told the police. Is that true? No. And you can see him rifle through his head to the left when they say, I mean, what else would you do to try to get yourself arrested other than this? He says, that's what I told the police. Yeah, that's what I told the police. I thought that. And then they ask him the question, what did you say? He's rifling through his left side of his head, trying to remember what he said. Did I call from a payphone or something like that? Is that true? No. Then he's self-amused again. You get that little bit of light in the face, a little bit of raised smile, just a touch. And his eyes kind of light up. And, he's sitting there looking. I think he's kind of in love with the camera, and it's something about that in the beginning. Then he's illustrating, and he's illustrating because he's telling the truth now, that he lied to the police. Do you have a friend? One? Somebody who could protect you from yourself? Because this, to me, looks like you're heading down a really ugly path. Unless I'm missing something entirely, he's admitting to lying to the police right here in front of us and being truthful about it. Got to love that. And then you see the stress increase, and you see that left eye starting to twitch, and we're going to see his face turn into just a circus. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, you're right. You got to love that. You got to love the Durst. He's like a caricature. He's like a Seinfeld character. This is the Seinfeld character that you would have if you were looking for the Seinfeld character who's a psychopath. I'm not saying this guy is. I'm just saying if it were an episode of Seinfeld and you were looking to make the Seinfeld version of a psychopath, this would be the guy, because he's like, yeah, yada, yada, yada. I told them this, I did this. It's like, it's no big deal. It's just no big deal at all. And I wrote down here like this, and I didn't know anything about this case. I went, this is the guy that chops you up and puts you in bags. He's such a character. And then I went on the Wikipedia at the end of looking at all of these and went, oh, it is actually probably the guy who chops you up and puts you in bags. It literally is that. It is so the antithesis of how somebody should be if they were being questioned around people being chopped up and found in bags. this just so casual. I mean, I love this floppy hand push away gesture because there's no line of energy that really pushes you away. It's not a hard push in any way. It's like, this is such nonsense. I can just flick it away. I can just dust it off. It just doesn't fit the situation. Utter caricature. So Greg, as you say, you gotta love the Durst. You gotta love the Durst. Durst is fantastic. Love the Durst. There, that's what I got for you.
All right. And keep in mind that for everything Scott said, Greg and Mark, and everything that I said here, everything that we're saying suggests deception is in relation to his baseline. So if you're talking to somebody, we always want to ask some truthful questions at first. If you're interviewing a babysitter, you're interviewing somebody for a job, you want to go through a lot of truthful questions first. That's when we make that determination, and we always look for clusters of behavior, not just one big red flag that means a lie. Just want to put that out there.
Good call.
Great call.
Excellent.
There was some discussion about that you spoke to her at some point.
Yes, that was the last part of my, the police are going to leave you alone now. I said, I called her, and I said I stopped at a payphone on the way home, or I went out for a walk later, and I called her from the payphone. She answered the phone, and that puts her in the city, and they're going to leave me alone now.
Did you end up speaking to her that night?
No. That's her address. Block letters if somebody's hiding their signature, and they spell Beverly wrong.
He looks like a monkey too. Did you notice that?
Like a
That's too bad.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, he's thinking as he's speaking as much as he does, and he's like, there's no big deal. Then you start to see some stress and self-awareness of it as he starts to touch his head, and he's like, uh-oh. When I see this, and I'm not usually the guy who brands the psychopath, I'm not that guy typically. When I see the guy starting to touch his head and then realize, uh-oh, camera's right there, I'm not even sure it's about that he's aware that he's scratching. I think it's more about his appearance than anything else. I don't want to mess up this. Is more what I see. I don't see stress about it. He looks at the camera, in fact, and his pupils aren't dilated. And clearly he knows that something is about to change. You can see it. Then he says, one of the things that when you talk about embedded confessions or things that are guilty knowledge, when he says, it looks like somebody has used block letters in the signature to hide their signature, that piece, then you start to say, who says that? Why do I write in block letters? So it's easy to read. Why would you write in block letters? So it's easy to read. He gets more and more and more weird as this thing goes on. But right here, we see that little stress, and then, uh-oh, I don't want to mess up my hair. That's what I see. Scott, what do you got?
All right. When he's again, he's trying to make it look like it's no big deal, but he's talking about the similarities of these. What's happened there are two notes. One note is written by him and addressed to this woman who's been murdered. And then another note is sent to her, sent to the police that tells them in other words, there's a body at her address. He uses another word for it. We'll get into that in a little while. And they're, oddly enough, they're the same. And there's the spelling of Beverly is spelled wrong on both of them, and they're both in block letters, the way he writes and the way the murderer wrote, because the murderer's the only one that could note there was a body in there. So it's just, and he's pointing these things out like, oh yeah, the misspelling, that's nothing, that's no big deal. Usually scratching the head is an adapter, and it's how you release energy, or you have confusion about something, or you're thinking about something, you're not inner dialogue as much, but it's more of contemplation. A lot of times you'll see somebody scratching, they'll be thinking. I don't think that's what we're seeing here. I agree with Greg. At the same time, I do think it's sort of an adapter, because he really doesn't know what to do at this point. He's got to do something. He's got all that energy built up. It's got to go somewhere. But then I think when he realizes he's on camera, it looks odd, so he stops doing it. and I think this is a person who's unsure of what he should do next, because when it's over, he keeps darting his eyes back and forth toward the guy who's keeping his eye on him. Like we always talk about liars, everybody thinks a liar breaks eye contact. Well, no, most likely the person lying is going to keep their eyes on you because they want to watch it and make sure you believe them. And he's keeping his eye on this guy. He keeps darting over there and looking like he's not doing anything, but he keeps kicking him back, making sure that guy, just checking to see if he believes him, see how things are going in that guy's head. So I think that's what we're pretty much looking at. And that's why it looks so childlike as well, because he's an old man, granted, but there's something not right about this guy in the head. There's something, we know what it is, and we'll talk about later on, but there's something not right about this guy in the head. Chase, what do you got?
Agree with everybody here. The facial squeeze on the left follows his first response. We see that again. And when there's this discussion of hiding a signature, there's a shoulder shrug, almost as if to communicate, I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you more. I wish I could really elaborate on that, but I can't. So try to see these double shoulder shrugs as a micro apology if you see them. And I would default to seeing it that way until you see evidence otherwise. There's a hard swallow again at the end of this response. And I think that the head tilt to the left while this is going on is used to mask the left facial squeeze that happens again, because I think that is almost an involuntary behavior that this person wants to quell, and I think that's used to mask it. There's at the first confirmation glance, which is what we call this after a statement, I'm looking away and I make a statement and then I kind of glance back to the interviewer. This first one, there's a facial squeeze, but I want you to watch it. It immediately drops from the face. So it does not fade off the face, which means that it was probably done deliberately. And this could be one of the people that has learned this facial expression is what gives him away, and then does it deliberately at certain times during the conversation later. So I know my tells, and I'm going to exhibit my tells strategically. So all in all, there's about 5 confirmation glances. Even if we conservatively say just 4 confirmation glances here, that's a 16 on the behavioral table of elements, barring everything else, just the glances here. And I think there's a lot more going on here that, Mark, I'd love for you to talk about.
Well, you know what I was going to say, Chase, because I put down here table of elements because I was desperate to know what number you put on this, because there is just so much happening. And I missed some of the stuff that you've put there simply because I was so overwhelmed with the stuff that I was seeing. There's just so much happening in one big cluster here that I kind of just reduce it into something is up here, exclamation mark. It's just like, what is going on? Like, something's definitely up here. It couldn't be more bold. So I've got this. I've got the double shoulder shrug there. I think you guys are right. There's potentially something to do with something else that is happening out of shot. But even so, and it is, we see it a lot with him. Maybe that's part of his baseline. I'm not sure, but still, it's there. Double shoulder shrug. I see sour taste in the mouth, so there's often a sense there of a bitterness, a disgust. There's something that doesn't taste good to him. It's a negative expression. There's this whole kind of face turn away. Could be blocking, could be I'm done. Let's go to something else. But again, it's a flag for me, along with the others. Then, just as you're saying, and everybody said that the eyes keep glancing back. Like, how's that working? Trying to look for that opinion. Are you getting this? Is this going well for me? There's so much of that happening. And then the head scratch, which again, it's like if you've got something that needs scratching on your head, again, the line goes straight through from the arm, through the fingers, and you scratch that thing. As you're saying, it's like a chimp. It's like a self-grooming gesture more than anything else. It's like creating a comb rather than a scratch, essentially. So again, I put that one down as potentially self-soothing. So again, something is up here. It's such a big cluster. I'm sure we could all watch it again and find other stuff that's happening in there. This one just screams out from moment one. Just something big is happening here, bigger than he is potentially making out in this. It doesn't quite ring with the rest of his bodily calm and kind of sat back, laid back demeanor. It's the antithesis of that. And so again, something's up. Yeah, that's what I got for you on that. Amazing.
That's her address. Block letters if somebody's hiding their signature. And they spelled Beverly wrong.
Awesome.
So I want to ask you about a bunch of photographs and stuff. Some of it's all stuff. Some of it's stuff you've seen before. Some of it I got from you. But
That's
for us
me and my yellow horse. We're in Central Park.
This one is you and Kathy. Could this be at her mother's house?
Might be in Vermont. I still had the long bangs type, what was it, Viking something or other hair.
This is an interesting picture of you and Susan.
Yes, I'd like to get a copy of this.
Yeah. Yeah, you can have this one. All right, I want to ask you about this address.
Susie. Now and again, I think about old times. GG, good luck, Bobby. Susie. What about the address?
This office, was your own office that you had for a period of time?
Yeah. When I left the family business, I moved my office downtown.
Do you remember writing this to Susan?
No, not at all. I left the family business in 94, 95. Susie, now and again, I think about old times. Good luck, Bobby. I don't know what Susie was doing. She must have been come out with a new something or other. Whatever she had published or whatever in 94, 95. I have no idea what that's about.
My theory is that this probably was you sending her some support.
Oh, that's possible. That certainly is possible. I can easily see writing that letter and putting a check in there.
Wow. Chase, what do you got?
Sorry, I don't know if y'all could hear that. My iPhone alarm was going off.
Oh, no. Shoot, no. All right, hang on one second.
Didn't hear it.
Let me pretend like I'm coming back. All right, Chase, what do you got?
I think this interviewer has a masterful technique in the way that he approaches questioning, the way that he double questions and kind of doubles back on some of these answers. And I think there's one interesting part here when we're hearing him say, I'd like to get a copy of this. There's some lip compression immediately following that statement. And I think the editing may be responsible here. There might be a cut in the video, but there is a little bit of a facial twitch and a staring at the photograph with no emotion whatsoever. But as far as the baseline goes, we know this is mostly truthful here in what we're seeing. The eyebrows are expressive. There's no facial squeezing on either side. There's no eye fluttering or blocking. And I think what we're seeing here is a comfort with asymmetrical illustrators, where one hand can illustrate, the other hand can illustrate, and he's comfortable with this. And there's expression here with comfort leaning forward, leaning backward, varying social tone and pitch in the voice. It is, for all intents and purposes, a normal looking person in this video. In the second half of it anyway. Scott?
All right, I agree. And keep in mind, which I should have said before we started this, but I was goofing on Chase. This is to show you his baseline before he started this next series of questions. So that's the reason we're looking at this, and that's what we're explaining is what we're seeing. So he looks fairly calm here. This is the only time, the first time we've seen any movement in the glabella or the eyebrow or the brows or the brow at all, any knitting at all, is during this. And we see some big movement in here because he's not focused on what he's supposed to be transmitting non-verbally, which is just as important as reading someone, is being able to know what you're sending out, is to understand what you're seeing as well as what you're taking in. He doesn't use Botox. People are going to say, well, it's probably because he used Botox. This cat doesn't use Botox. Not this guy. I don't think he doesn't care that much about it. We're seeing, okay, that's a lot of brow movement. He's got a really low tick rate at this point as well, because nothing's really bothering him. He's still kind of relaxed. At the very top of this, we see a lot of head movement. And that shows his concern and anxiety about what's getting ready to happen. But like you're right, Chase, this guy calms him right down. Who's this guy remind you all of? Very calm, just like, hey, okay, we're just talking here. Everything's fine. I'm talking to you. Jim Smith. That's what it reminded me of, because he's just so matter of fact and nothing's a big deal. And he's got that really calm, soothing demeanor. And he's the kind of guy you call when something goes bad and you go, listen, man, this is going bad. You go, oh, well, let's talk about that. That's the kind of guy you want to go talk to. I think you're right, Chase. I think this guy's a fantastic interviewer. Great this, because he knows when not to say anything. And he leaves these open-ended questions. And he doesn't go on and say, no, wait a minute, what about so-and-so? He doesn't do that. Everything's just really laid back. That's so tough to do, especially for somebody like me who talks a lot and talks really fast. Shutting up is tough sometimes, but you learn it over a period of time. It takes a while. This guy's got it figured out. He does it really well. The first time we see his eyebrows narrow is when he says, do you remember writing this to Susan? Then he shows that concern, that glabella comes together. But that suggests like or dislike or concern. And that's the only time that's the first time we really see that. And we see him go up really high as he continues to talk about that. I think you're right as well, Chase. I'm saying Chase 40 times in this, but I think we're also seeing a little bit of a smile when he's looking at the picture that he's showing her. I think of Susan. So I think he and in the documentary, one guy talks about how he used to carry pictures around with him of people that he liked and loved. So pictures are a big deal to him.
When you asked us, like, who does this guy remind you of? And I thought you were talking about the suspect, and I was going to say the grandpa on Christmas Vacation.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's where I've seen that cat. All right. Yeah, you're right, man. Good call. All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. So here's the baseline that I get out of this. Just at the start, a general disinterest in what's going on. He looks off out of the window, not really engaged, a disengagement with it. So that's kind of interesting. But then where does he get interested? Gets really interested in his own image, really interested in pictures about himself. But, the first one is like, that's just me. Does he say like, that's me on my yellow horse?
Yes.
He literally does say that. Okay, interesting. Well, again, that's very high status. It's really high status still to be on a horse. Like, that's super high status. So it's just that's just me on an object that most human beings will never ever experience. So pretty extraordinary brush away. Apart from Greg, I've rarely been on a horse. A brush away there on that. So he keeps clocking the camera as well, keeps looking down the camera again, interested in the perception of him, interested in images of him, the perception of him. Baseline, he does take up space. I think that's very much a baseline cultural New York kind of thing. I see disgust on Susie and the support for her. So I saw a gesture of disgust, but there's a general baseline of a lot of disgust and disdain and disinterest, and it feels like his baseline is a little bit above everything else. Literally, he's on a horse with against other people. You see him lean forward when it's about him, about images about him. He leans right forward. Take that as a baseline against where you see him in the rest of the interview. There's very little evidence that he leans right forward into and gets that kind of interested and engaged with. It's interesting. I mean, kind of opening up possibilities here, because I take what you said, Chase, about the him talking about wanting a copy of that image. I look at that image, and we've got the woman with her arms around him, very much an image of somebody who's valued. She is valuing him. She's encompassed him, and that's the image that he says, I'd like a copy of that one, the one where it's a clear signal that he's somebody of extreme value. Now, that might be, again, opposite to what Chase might have been saying about it. Doesn't really matter, because all we're ever trying to do here is just open up possibilities. Like, what are all the possibilities as we go through this? Because the more possibilities you can open up, the more critical you can be with your thinking, the closer you're going to get away from your judgment system and into your, smart thinking system, your critical thinking system. So, why does he want a photograph? Why does he want a copy of that one? Is it a show? Is it that actually he's not that interested in it, but he needs to give a show of, I'm super interested in this, give me a copy? Or is it that he does actually want a copy of it? I don't know. But the more possibilities we have, the more we can put it together with all the other evidence we see, and the closer we're going to get to the truth, which is very different from the person who goes, I see what I've got here. I got a great instinct for this stuff. I can just smell, the people who are bad. Well, you probably got a less than 50-50 chance of doing that. Actually, it's the critical thinkers that will get closer to the truth, which is why, it's good that we think about these opportunities here, and you show up for every show and think about them with us. Who have we got left? Scott, have you been? Oh, Greg. I'm sorry, Greg.
Yeah.
Greg.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. So this is a great baseline opportunity. First of all, you talk about his head moving a lot. I think we're going to see that shift when he starts to feel nervous. We see his head shift. I think, Mark, that when he looks out the window, that's a bit of feigned, because yes, I think he's pretending that he doesn't care. But when you see the guy starting to say, hey, I want to talk to you about some things, you see a little nervous reaction in him until he says, most of them I got from you. Then you see him kind of relax a little. You see his body soften a little, and then he turns back, and when he starts getting asked this question about the picture and he goes into his hairstyle, a little bit of chaff and redirect there, he gets off the topic and he goes to the right, which people would say, well, maybe that's his eye accessing for memory. No, that's one of those things about, what was that called? Trying to remember what's possible, it was called in some Viking something. Deviation from what we saw when he was asked, what did you tell the police? So different, and I don't want you to think it means he's lying, it means he's rifling through his head and you see him rolling around. The other one is when he furrows his brow, I think he's concentrating some of this time. So when he tries to concentrate, and I think that may be cognitive decline or something, but when he's doing that, you see him concentrate and bring that brow together in some of these cases. Chase, I think you said a great thing. He looks like a normal person. And Mark, you even took it to greater clarification, normal for a New Yorker. Because if you're doing this in Georgia, that's not normal. But if you're doing that in New York, a lot of hand movement and that kind of thing, yeah, that's really normal, and it's cultural. As he walks into these pictures, he looks and makes some camera contact, and then he shows him this picture of the horse, and he's very proud of that. You can see actually something amused or happiness, a little bit of it come across his face as his face softens, and a little bit of a smile. And then when he starts talking about the girlfriend, Catherine, wife, I think it was in this case, right? Or is it Susie? I can't remember which one of the two people. He looks down and to his right. I think it's because the guy puts the photo there. Otherwise, we would associate that with something coming up emotional. And that he does that little resignation mouth, and he gets an eye twitch when he's looking at that photo. Does it mean something? Not sure. Let's watch and see. Does it change when he gets that same thing? I'll rifle through a couple of these you guys have already hit. I think some of the glitchy lip pursing thing is biology. I think he's just done it so many times. It's just biology taking over. He does one thing that I really like. You show him the thing and ask him about the address. He doesn't even talk about the address. And I don't think that is a chaff and redirect. I think it's a personality issue. And I think it's a personality issue associated with the fact that he jumps to content first because he wants to make sure there's nothing incriminating. That's a great interrogation thing. Because if I'm going to interrogate you and I hand you a note and you jump to content, it tells me something about your personality and something that it matters and it's important to you. So there's a lot in here. I'll stop there. And the last thing I'll leave is that oversized, legitimate body language about what he's talking about is finally ended by he gives him an out and he goes, "That's what it was," and slaps his leg. That's what I got.
Nope.
No.
Nice try.
Good try.
Okay.
I saw you earlier and I was just like,
Okay, I was practicing.
So I want to ask you about a bunch of photographs and stuff. Some of it's stuff you've seen before. 'Cause some of it I got from you. But
That's
for us
me and my yellow horse. We're in Central Park.
this one is you and Kathy. Could this be at her mother's house?
Might be in Vermont. I still had the long bangs type, what was it, Viking something or other hair.
This is an interesting picture of you and Susan.
Yes, I'd like to get a copy of this.
Yeah. Yeah, you can have this one. All right, I want to ask you about this address.
Susie. Now and again I think about old times. GG, good luck, Bobby. Susie. What about the address?
This office, was your own office that you had for a period of time?
Yeah. I when I left the family business, I moved my office downtown.
Do you remember writing this to Susan?
No, not at all. I left the family business in 94, 95. Susie, now and again, I think about old times. Good luck, Bobby. I don't know what Susie was doing. She must have been come out with a new something or other. Whatever she had published or whatever in 94, 95. I have no idea what that's about.
My theory is that this probably was you sending her some support.
That's possible. That certainly is possible. I can easily see writing that letter and putting a check in there.
Came in. Would you read me the address on this envelope?
Robert Durst, floor 24, 67 Wall Street, New York, 10005.
And who you sent it to?
Susan Berman, 1527 Benedict Canyon, Beverly Hills, California. Beverly spelled wrong, California 90210. Which is the zip code that you want in Beverly Hills, but you just didn't want Susie's neighborhood.
Chaff and redirect.
exactly. That's all. Can't miss that one.
All right, Greg, you want to go first?
Yeah, this is really an easy one. I can't help but say that's chaff and redirect. But it's more importantly, there's some discomfort. We usually say when a person touches their face that could indicate discomfort. I think in his case it does. And then there's a look down. A lockdown of not connecting with the data. Then he moves immediately to, let's not even talk about that. Let's talk about who's who. This is the address I know. This is the address you want, or this is the zip code you want, but not her neighborhood. So in the context of a couple of sentences, he talks about who's who. He talks about it being a great neighborhood. He doesn't talk about the topic, and then he disparages the victim as well. She's not in the best neighborhood in Beverly Hills, God knows. So we'll take it from there. Chase, what do you got?
Great. I think there are two ways that he has been manipulating the public. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the first one, or in this clip. When he's saying the address or the Beverly Hills is spelled wrong, this guy has an interesting trait that I think he is able to apply or predict the emotional response of others. And I think this is a calculated and learned skill that he absolutely demonstrated in Galveston, Texas, when he was on trial. And he applied the jury's skepticism to himself and mirrored what he thought other people would be thinking. It's almost as if he's honest about his dishonesty, so why not believe him if he's being so honest about everything? Now, it's kind of like what people used to say about Bill Clinton. He's full of crap, but at least he's honest. And that's why people trusted him. So that entire process is him going through this and saying, yeah, I totally understand that a person would be skeptical about this because I lied. But now that I'm saying that I lied, I am being very honest now. So there's no reason to doubt any of the credibility of anything I'm saying. And finally, at the end, when he's talking about Susie's neighborhood, there is some very slight disgust. Mark?
Yeah, so I agree with you. Disgust on the neighborhood. Yeah, it absolutely is a chaff and redirect. Is he trying to direct us to the idea that that neighborhood is potentially rough, and therefore, of course, you live in that neighborhood, you're going to get yourself killed? I think that's one of the narratives he's maybe trying to put down there. So he gives us that disgust. Along with that's the area that you don't want. So it's implied, I think, rough part of the neighborhood. You're going to be in trouble if you decide to live there. There's that disgust around also the misspelling of Beverly, and I think you're right, Chase. He's opening with the problem. He's taking control. He's doing spin, which is if you know that there's an issue, you don't let somebody else voice it. You be the one who delivers the issue. Now you're in control of the problem, not them. So good spin technique there. What's the disgust around? Is the disgust around, well, that's bad spelling? Is the disgust around this is the piece of evidence that's glaring is going to get me? I don't know why he signals disgust around that. I think there's those two opportunities and a bunch of others as well. But certainly we're seeing this disgust around this. And yet at the same time, we've got all this kind of baseline of general kind of disdain and disinterest and disgust. But as we'll see, this is a key element here as to why we might distrust him. And because of that, I think I'm going to put this piece of disgust down to his knowledge that this is not a good piece of evidence in his favor. He smells his own rat there, essentially. Scott, what do you got for us?
All right. I agree with you, Mark. I think that disgust also goes back to himself. He's a little bit disgusted. Narcissists can't stand themselves. They completely abhor themselves, and that's one of the things that make them act the way they do. And I think he's disgusted with himself because he knows he made that mistake twice, and that is just glaring. That shows it's him. At the beginning, when he finishes scratching his head at that, I don't know if I got that in there or not. I don't think I did, but he was touching his head before he came down and did this number. That's a pacifying behavior. So he's starting to feel a little bit of stress here because he knows what's coming. So he's trying to calm himself down a little bit. And that, if everybody will do that real quick, if you'll just do that, then you'll feel that it lasts after you do that. It starts relaxing those muscles around your mouth and around your jaw. And I believe that's what's happening there. Then, and I agree with everybody. I won't go through whatever and repeat what everybody said. But with the chaff and redirect, after he points out the problem, then he goes to the chaff and redirect. Like, oh yeah, there's that. But boy, she sure lived in a bad neighborhood. This is bad. And yeah, the murderer did this. But I agree with you again, Mark. This is a bad neighborhood, so I'm not surprised something like that happened to her. I got the same stuff you guys got, so let's move on for good.
Lovely.
Came in. Would you read me the address on this envelope?
Robert Durst, floor 24, 67 Wall Street, New York, 10005.
And who you sent it to?
Susan Berman, 1527 Benedict Canyon, Beverly Hills, California. Beverly spelled wrong, California 90210. Which is the zip code that you want in Beverly Hills, but you just didn't want Susie's neighborhood.
So obviously I want to ask you about the cadaver note, the famous cadaver note. Can you read me the spelling of Beverly Hills?
Police, 1527 Benedict Canyon, cadaver. Same misspelling.
So Beverly is spelled the same way on this and the same way on this.
Same misspelling.
What does that say to you?
Well, I mean, the writing looks similar and the spelling is the same, so I can see the conclusion the cops would draw, or the writing exemplar person would clue they were both written by the same person.
Yeah, that's some odd behavior. Well, okay, I'll go first on this one. All his smooth and easy fluid movements have disappeared. His tick rate's going up a little bit. He gets quieter. His voice goes down just a little bit. And lots of head movement. And that indicates anxiety as well. And then, of course, like we're all laughing at, we see his gastric irritation grows. And that happens when you get bad news or your anxiety goes through the roof. That's, again, he's the master of in one way, of masking the stress he's going through if he didn't have the tics. But at the same time, on the inside, he's falling apart. His guts are just churning because he knows what's on the way, and he's got to defend that. There's no way out of this. He can't excuse himself out of it. He can't. There's no way out of it. He's got to take this one head on. Yeah, I'd say that's. I'll stop. And I think what we're seeing there when it shows what's will be thought of as disgust, I'll go ahead and say I think that's just one of his tics. I think that's part of it. And trying tick control at that point, I don't think he gets a very good handle on that one. But so I know we're all going to cover pretty much the same stuff, so I'll leave some stuff open. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so again, I see disgust on the misspelling. Yeah, misspelt. I see it there. More interest in this, leans forward into this, like we saw him lean forward into photographs of himself and what he's interested in. So it speaks to me like this is more important than other stuff that he's been shown, way more important. The cough that happens, the full face block that happens there. Yeah. Just as you said there, Scott, the gastric activity suddenly happening. We haven't seen this anywhere else. Now, suddenly there's a mass of gas. Now, you've got to understand your stomach has the majority of your serotonin acceptors in there. We often think about, so serotonin is the neurotransmitter that says, hey, this is a really, really good situation. This is actually good. Dopamine is the one that says this is going to get good. Stick around for this. It's going to be good. Serotonin says this is super good. And there's a good reason why we'd have those serotonin acceptors mainly in our stomach, because first thing we've got to do is get water and food in there, and we want that to be registered way before anything else registers that, because if you're not eating and you're not drinking, there's a problem going to be going on for you, you know, and so that would suggest to me that his whole body is saying, this is really not good right now. Right now, this is all bad news. And that's why the stomach starts this disgustory nature going on. It's even right in his stomach now. To your point, Scott, it's kind of beyond the signals of disgust anymore. It's literally in that, what often people call the stomach brain, which is kind of accurate and inaccurate at the same time. But it's a fair metaphor that we've actually got this thinking system, simple thinking system in our stomach, which is trying to work out, is this a good environment for me or bad? I think he's telling us right now it couldn't get any worse than the information that I have in front of me right now. Big cluster happening there. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Brilliant stuff from everybody here. And to add to this, I think we're seeing an understanding and an awareness of what we might be thinking, and an agreement and an alignment with that. I can totally understand how somebody might come to that conclusion. This facial covering that we see is very unusual for humans in normal conversation, but in particular for him. And the burping that we're seeing here is called psychogenic belching or supragastric belching. And this has a mental origin as opposed to a physical origin, and it is directly associated with acute stress or acute anxiety. If you want to look this up, the research on this, or some that I would recommend, is from Dr. Pamela Rutledge. She's the director of psychology research in Newport Beach, media psychology research. So all of this stuff spikes with the rapid acute onset of anxiety or stress. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. I have very rarely seen videos of psychogenic belching in my career. I've read about it. This is a fantastic example that I will now add to my training library. Greg?
Yeah, so he starts off in this whole thing showing real interest, to your point, Mark, but he does it differently. When he was looking at pictures of himself, his head is down, the top of his head is exposed. That is the most accommodating move a human being can do. Think of Asian cultures where a bow is a greeting, and we show our empty hands, Asians show the top of their head. Those are submissive, giving your life to another person. He doesn't do that. Watch him. He leans in, but his head is this way. When he leans in, his head never bows so that you can see the top of his head, different from the first video, because he recognizes this as a threat. I'm also going to tell you, I notice his blink rate goes through the roof for the first time. Really, his blink rate is up. I think that whole gut thing, maybe it's evolutionarily, if we do that, people leave us alone. Who knows? Something in there causes him to do this burping thing, this belching thing. I think you're right, Chase. It's probably not under his control. The full-on face barrier, see no evil. I mean, that's the see no evil move, right? Nobody does that. I've rarely seen that in my life, and I've seen a lot of people get in trouble. When he gets to the point that he is doing this, the reason he's showing this fight or flight is he's not a guy who is externally stimulated to the point of real fight or flight. It's internal. He has to internalize it and feel the threat and know it's there before he responds. We know a group of people who do that. They have to have that fight or flight. And he probably fits in your favorite group, I would say, Scott, before I go much further. But then as you watch him, he gets to processor overload, I think is why he covers his face. He just can't take any more input because now he's starting to realize. Then when his hands come down, he does that bitter taste thing and his lips go to resolution. That's it. Resignation. I'm done. And I know what you're thinking. I think that's where the fight or flight comes from, and I think we're seeing a very different approach than we would from other people. Scott, to your point as well, his head's jerking and moving. I think we got this guy on the ropes now, and from here it'll get really interesting. That's all I got.
Excellent.
Right.
Excellent.
Awesome.
I've never seen anybody actually do this in real life.
Me either. I mean, you
No,
play
that's-
pea pie or whatever as a little kids. Other than that,
Yeah.
So obviously I want to ask you about the cadaver note, the famous cadaver note. Can you read me the spelling of Beverly Hills?
Police 1527 Benedict Canyon cadaver. Same misspelling.
So Beverly is spelled the same way on this and the same way on this.
Same misspelling.
What does that say to you?
Well, I mean, the writing looks similar and the spelling is the same, so I can see the conclusion the cops would draw, or the writing exemplar person would conclude they were both written by the same person.
all right.
I think this is a comparison of the two, right? Which is,
Very similar.
so I guess the question is, did you write the cadaver note?
No, I didn't write the cadaver note.
So you wrote this, but you didn't write this.
Definitely wrote this, but I definitely did not write that.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so here we see a furtherance of that internalization of the problem. You see he now is starting to show some real fight or flight. He locks his hands down, holds them right by his side until he's forced to point to which of these two things he does. Now, guys, we always tell you about strong positive denial and about non-contracted denials. He does both of those. Doesn't mean that he's innocent. This is why we always say it is based on the person. His head movement cadence is different here, and he's just trying to lock down. The interesting thing for me is he says, which one of these did you write? I didn't write the cadaver note. Well, I definitely didn't write that. So it's interesting because I think this guy may have switched up on him and he didn't realize it. You can certainly see the fight or flight, and there you go. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, lovely. So we got an ear tug at the start. Now, is that because blood is rushing to the ears because of stress and he's trying to calm that down? Is that a self-soothe? I'm not sure, but it's outside of his baseline, and so that's very different than, oh look, there's a Pinocchio's nose for you. If they touch their ears, they're lying. Of course, you know that's nonsense. We know that's that's nonsense. In this specific situation, when put together with some other elements, you know, it may add a point or so to Chase's table of elements. So in the grand scheme of things, interesting to note that in this particular video. But you know this, don't walk out there and because somebody tugs their ear, you go, well, there's a liar over there, just saw one over there. No, that's not critical thinking. That's best guess thinking. No, I did not write the cadaver note. Yeah, absolutely right, Greg. I mean, that's strong and positive denial, just as everybody says. But we do get that bitter taste at the end of it. So that's notable for me. What's most notable for me is I did write that one, but I did write that one, but I didn't write this one. Both have upward inflections on them. Okay, so you know, linguistically interesting way to put it, but the most important for me is both have an upward inflection. Both there seems to be a hope of. Do you buy it? Do you agree with me? Will you go with this idea? If he didn't write one of them, I would expect a downward intonation on that one, but I didn't write this one. I would expect downward intonation on that. We get upward intonation. That's what I got for you on that one. Scott, what do you got on this?
All right. Yeah, with the ear pulling, I think that's a combination of thinking. That's what people usually do when they're thinking about stuff. They'll pull on their ears. But I think it's a combination of thinking and an adapter as well with that. And again, you've covered pretty much everything I was going to talk about. It's ramping up. Here comes the stress we see on him. Again, the interviewer still remains calm. He's just same cadence, same throwing the questions at him, just lobbing them at him like that, and he's catching them and trying to be calm about it. But let's watch his ticks as they start to ramp up here. So, Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I'll go pretty quick. The second, he denies it twice here in this video. The second time he does it, there's a crinkle on the left side of the face, which we've determined based on his baseline is likely high stress. So we would grade that as a 4 on the behavioral table of elements. There's a pronoun absence in the denial, in the second denial, which I would grade as a 4. There's a non-contraction where he says did not. And of course, we could all say, oh, I say did not all the time. That's fine. Then you would still be only at a 4 if we use that language on a regular basis. And using it at your baseline means that it would not be judged against a deceptive or potentially deceptive statement. And I think the ear pulling classifies as facial touching, or I would put it in that category. I would also call that a 4. And I think that's a 20.
I think this is a comparison of the two, right? Which is
very similar.
So I guess the question is, did you write the cadaver note?
No, I didn't write the cadaver note.
So you wrote this, but you didn't write this?
Definitely wrote this, but I definitely did not write that.
I guess I'm searching for a way, among other things, to understand how
two people could misspell Beverly.
I'm searching for a way to figure out how you didn't write the cadaver note, because it's so similar.
Well, what I see as the similarity is really the misspelling in the Beverly. Other than that, the block letters are block letters. How else would you write a block letter than that? I mean, it's almost like a typed thing. It's going to look, with two typewriters, it's going to look the same.
So you wrote one of these, but you didn't write the other one.
I wrote this one, but I did not write the cadaver one.
And can you tell me which one you didn't write?
No.
That's perfect.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Okay, Chase, what do you got?
The stretching that we're seeing at the beginning of this is artificial. He has a lot of behaviors in interviews that show false displays of comfort during high stress. In my opinion, this is a core strategy being exhibited right here. because this is the opposite of the normal way of I will display stress behaviors during relaxation, and I will display false relaxation during stressful periods. So I think that when a person views one as a solution, then the opposite can also serve in a different scenario. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. There is assistance versus denial. This is exactly what we saw when we watched the Colonel Russell Williams video. There was assistance instead of a denial. Let me help you. Let's examine this together. And the denial is non-contracted here. Lastly, there's two reasons I think that he's able to manipulate the public so well. And number one is his wealth and how much money he has. It is proven in many different studies that when we see a wealthy person, we're more likely to attribute irrational behavior to rational thought processes. We're also more likely to trust people who we know are wealthy. The second one that we're seeing here, I have been doing to you since we started this video. And it is dissociative language. Instead of saying he, him, her, I've been using the behavior and talking minimally about the human being, and I've been talking about the person as if it was completely distanced from reality or from a real living creature. Every interview he's done, he has used this exact type of language. So if you go back, you can hear me doing the exact same thing that we have seen him do in many of his interviews. And I'll pass it to Greg.
Yeah, and the thing we have to pay attention to is I think when you start to talk about people who are cloistered or removed from society, if you have to go to work every day and you have to punch in, you get lots of input about how to behave. If you live in a cloistered environment, you can wear Kleenex boxes on your feet. You can get away with a lot of crazy stuff when you're cloistered. So people get in arrested development. They get to a certain place that they have to live because they're not getting enough input, and they get all kinds of crazy things going on. So weird behaviors, even that Chase can be that dissociative language, because if he's always talked that way, not saying it is in this case, but you got to be careful when you're talking about people who've lived outside of normal input and normal interaction. Howard Hughes, of course, is one that comes to mind. But when he does this, I think it's almost exasperation, like, where am I going? What am I going to do? And then he tries to make it look like it's something different. Or, I don't know if it's that, but I don't know why he suddenly thinks balling his fist is a good idea. Maybe that's also unintentional. So when we see people do things, putting their hands behind their head, if he's keenly aware that people think when you do this, you look arrogant, then he's probably going to shift. I don't know that he's that self-aware. He's overdone whatever it is he's trying to do. Nobody in an interview does this, whether it's because he's trying to appear to be comfortable, trying to take some power, whatever it is. Nobody normal interacts that way when they're on the ropes, and he's clearly on the ropes. And I see when he drops his arms, well, that's it. He's in trouble. He knows he's in trouble. So then he goes to alternate methodology number one, and that is, well, let's try this. Then he starts going, well, anybody would write letters this way. Even goes into something about a typewriter, as if anybody who's listening knows what he's talking about. A typewriter, not big font, not any of that. He's using things from his past and rolling down it. But he tries that lilting up at the end of each sentence, uncharacteristic to everything he's said to now. He's in a bind and he knows it. And I think resignation's here. He has nothing left to do. Scott, what do you got?
All right, at the beginning, we see his head again darting back and forth, and that means he's thinking about what's happening, what's going to happen as well. It's sort of a contemplative move as far as thinking goes. And he's problem solving at that point, running around in there, how's he going to get out of this? And then right out of the gate, this is complete differentiation from his baseline to this, complete deviation in those two. This is nothing like his baseline where he's sitting around relaxed and talking at a normal gait. And he speeds up a little bit when he's talking. His breathing rate goes way up here. His in and out goes up a lot. And he jumps in to finish that question before the interviewer even finishes it, when he says two people could misspell Beverly. And what he doesn't realize is, when he's talking about these block letters, is forensics or the FBI is going to come in and go, hey, listen, why don't you write Beverly about 12 times, and then write Hills about 12 times separately, and just do that real quick in block letters, and they're going to be able to nail this guy like that. So I'll cover some of the same stuff, but the arms go out in this big old fake yawn. He doesn't know what to do. He's trying to make it look like it's not a very big deal. And his appearance is semi-calm, but he's on fire inside. You guys have covered pretty much everything I was going to talk about, so I'm not going to keep going over it. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate a little bit myself as well. I think you're right, Scott. I think he goes for a yawn. I think he's going for, just as you were saying, Chase, I will play the opposite on purpose of what would be expected. I'm super casual about this. I think he realizes, oh no, that's just going to be too big. That's just going to be too much. And so he suspends it there and then goes with the fists. And he's like, I don't know what any of this means, but it looks quite aggressive. So, and then we get this final kind of drop at the end, very loud and very clear, of he's pretty much done now. He knows, I think, this isn't working very well for him. He's pretty much cornered. To your point there, Greg, it is very much an on the ropes signal there. It's very much like he's just now getting beaten up on the ropes on this one, probably quite rightly. So I got nothing new to say about that one, but it is extraordinary. I don't think I've seen that other than with somebody literally on the boxing ring ropes.
And Greg, let me clarify that when I was talking about his behaviors of doing relaxation on purpose. By on purpose, I mean habitual. Probably.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, not.
I understood that. It's an organism trait, right? What made the organism successful, the organism does. Same thing. I agree with it.
I guess I'm searching for a way, among other things, to understand how.
Two people could misspell Beverly.
I'm searching for a way to figure out how you didn't write the cadaver note, because it's so similar.
Well, what I see as the similarity is really the misspelling in the Beverly. Other than that, the block letters are block letters. How else would you write a block letter than that? I mean, it's almost like a typed thing. It's going to look, with two typewriters, it's going to look the same.
So you wrote one of these, but you didn't write the other one.
I wrote this one, but I did not write the cadaver one.
And can you tell me which one you didn't write?
No.
Hey, one thing that we can't leave this scene without pointing out is, Scott, you brought it up, but let's applaud it. This is one of the best questions I've ever heard an interviewer do. I'm just trying to sort out, I forget his exact words, stops and lets the knucklehead fill in the blanks. That's beautiful questioning. Guys, if you are an interviewer, pay attention. That's the way to get people to tell you things, is stop short. Humans need to complete a thought, and they'll do it for you.
Another thing I thought was great about his questioning, he didn't say which one is yours, or which one did you write. He says, which one didn't you write? Which one isn't yours? Wow, that was great. That really was great, because you can say, I think it's this one, but he can't. This way, he can't get around that. He can't pick it out. Gosh, that's great. Yeah, he was really
one of my favorite ways to baseline when you capture people and you're trying to get their baseline is you take their clothes after they've been put into a jumpsuit, after they've been stripped, and you hold a bag and you say, hey, I think I have your bag right here. Tell me what you're wearing when you're captured. You get a baseline. It's wonderful because they want their stuff back. There's no reason to lie. It's a wonderful tool.
All right. Well, make sure you watch this documentary. It's on HBO, The Jinx. That's one you want to watch. Man, it's so good. It really is. Because this guy questions masterfully. Really, really good. Really, really good. All right, fellas. Well, I think that's a good one. And if you like what we're doing, please subscribe. Please subscribe and become a panelist, because as soon as you hit that subscribe button, you're one of us. So come on in. We're having a blast.
Tell your friends.
Oh, yeah. Tell everybody you know. There you go. All right, fellas. I think this was another good one. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
Hey, it's Dr. Phil here. If you're smart, you will subscribe to the Behavior Panel.